A widow walked into Mercy Flats with $1 left to her name. By sundown, she had spent it on a coal-black stallion the whole town called a killer. He had broken 2 ribs, crushed one man's hand, and sent another crawling out of the dust with blood in his teeth. No sane person would touch him. But before the season turned, that same horse would stand between the widow and a crowd that was ready to let her burn. Her name was Mara Bell. 3 days before she reached Mercy Flats, her husband Samuel died on the wagon road. Not dramatically, not with last words that made the world easier to understand. 1 hour he was sweating beside her, promising the fever would pass. The next he was slumped against the wagon board, with his eyes half open and his hands already cooling. Mara sat beside him until the mules stopped walking. The road stretched ahead of her like a lie. Behind her was a failed farm in Missouri, 2 graves, and a life she had sold piece by piece for the promise of a better one. In front of her was desert grass, a cracked axle, and a town she had never seen. She buried Samuel with a shovel meant for fire pits. The ground was hard as fired clay. By the time the grave was deep enough, her palms were open and bleeding, and the sun had gone red behind the ridge. She tried to pray. Nothing came. So she took off his wedding ring, pressed it into her fist, and whispered, "I am sorry I lived longer." Then she stood up. Because grief could wait, thirst could not. By the time she saw Mercy Flats, Mara had 1 dress, 1 blanket, 1 tin cup, Samuel's ring, and a $1 sewn into the inside hem of her skirt. Everything else had been spent, stolen, broken, or buried. Mercy Flats was not a merciful place. It was 12 buildings scattered along a road of white dust, with a church that leaned west, a saloon that never closed, and a stockyard where every living thing looked tired. The first man Mara asked for work looked her up and down like she was a dead animal in the road. "Kitchen's full," he said. "I did not ask for a kitchen." That made him laugh, not kindly. "What can you do?" "Horses." His smile faded a little. "No woman in this town works stock. Then this town has been wasting women." He looked at her for a long moment, then pointed with 2 fingers toward the far end of the street. "Ward Ranch is holding an auction this afternoon. Mostly broken tack and bad horses. If you want to get laughed at in public, start there." Mara thanked him because manners cost nothing. Then she walked toward the noise. The auction yard stank of sweat, rope, manure, and hot iron. Men crowded the rail fence, with hats pulled low and money folded in their hands. At the center of the pen stood a horse so black he seemed to drink the sunlight. He was huge, 16 hands at least, with a scar across his left shoulder and another pale line running down the bridge of his nose. 4 ropes held him from 4 directions. A 5th man stood behind him with a shotgun. The auctioneer did not try to make him sound valuable. "Government remount reject. Name on the bill says Cinder. meaner than a trapped wolf. No warranty, no returns. Buyer hauls him today. Cinder struck the gate so hard, the whole fence shuddered. Half the men stepped back. The auctioneer spat into the dust. Who opens? Silence. Then a broad man with a broken nose yelled, "Sell him to Pike for meat." Laughter rolled through the yard. A man beside the pen lifted his hand. Grady Pike. Mara did not know his name yet, but she knew the type. He had the calm cruelty of someone who never doubted the world had given him permission. $1, Grady called, for the hide. The auctioneer looked relieved just to have a bid. $1, do I hear too? Mara felt the silver coin against her thigh. Samuel had kept it for luck. A Liberty dollar, worn nearly smooth, the last piece of money they had sworn not to touch. Grady lifted the shotgun and rested it over his shoulder. Cinder saw the movement. The stallion went wild. He reared against the ropes, eyes white, mouth foaming, the sound coming out of him not like a neigh, but like a scream dragged through metal. "Hold him," Grady shouted. One of the handlers jerked too hard. Another cracked a rope across the horse's face. The scream changed. Mara was over the fence before she made the decision. Stop. No one listened. She walked farther into the pen. I said stop. The yard went quiet in pieces. First the nearest men, then the auctioneer, then Grady Pike, who turned with the shotgun still balanced on his shoulder. "Lady, you lost?" "No." "Then you are stupid." "Maybe." She kept her eyes on the horse. Cinder was trembling so hard the ropes shook. "Let the ropes down." Grady laughed. "That animal will open you from throat to belly."
Not if you stop giving him reasons. A murmur moved through the crowd. The ranch owner was standing near the gate, tall, lean, hat brim shadowing half his face. Elias Ward had said nothing since Mara entered the pen. Now he looked from her to the horse, then back again. "You know horses?" "I know fear when I see it," Grady snorted. "She knows nothing. This devil kicked Nate Hollis through a stall wall and put Carter's hand under a hoof. You let him loose and you will be scraping widow off the dirt." Mara reached into the torn hem of her skirt and pulled out the silver dollar. The coin flashed once in the sun. "I will buy him." The laughter came hard. Even the auctioneer smiled. "Ma'am, $1 does not buy that horse. It bought him for slaughter a moment ago." Grady's face darkened. "That was my bid. Then I bid the same for his life." Elias Ward stepped closer to the rail. "What exactly are you buying?" Mara looked at Cinder. 7 days. The whole yard went still. 7 days to prove he is not what you say he is. If I fail, you do what you were already going to do. If I succeed, I get work. Elias studied her. Mara knew what he saw. A widow in a dust-caked dress, boots with split seams, a face burned by travel, hands that shook because she had not eaten since morning. But he also saw that she was still standing in a pen with a horse no man in town wanted near him. Elias held out his hand. Mara placed the silver dollar in his palm. Grady Pike moved like he had been slapped. "You cannot be serious." Elias closed his fist around the coin. "Drop the ropes." "No." Elias did not raise his voice. "Drop them." The handlers looked at Grady, then at Elias.
One by one, the ropes fell into the dust. Cinder lurched backward, free enough to kill her now. Mara did not move toward him. She went down slowly onto one knee. The dust was hot through the fabric of her skirt. She turned her face slightly away and lowered her eyes. Cinder stamped once, twice. His breath came in harsh bursts. Mara began to hum. It was not a song. It was the kind of sound a mother makes before words, the kind a frightened animal can feel before it understands. The crowd waited for blood. Cinder took one step, then another. Mara kept humming. The scar across his nose was close enough now that she could see where old rope had cut him raw. He stretched his neck. His nostrils flared over her open palm. For one frozen second, everyone in Mercy Flats held their breath. Then the horse touched her hand. Not softly, not sweetly, just a brief press of his muzzle against her skin, but it was enough. Mara stopped humming. She looked up at Elias Ward. "He is not a killer," she said. "He is a creature who ran out of ways to ask people to stop hurting him." No one laughed then. Elias turned to Grady. "Put him in the north barn. No whip, no bit, no rope unless she asks for one." Grady's jaw worked. "And her?" Elias looked at Mara. "She starts now." The first night, Mara slept in a stall across from Cinder, with her back against a feed bin and the silver dollar hanging from a strip of cloth around her neck. She had nowhere else to go. Elias offered a cot in the bunkhouse, but the men inside watched her like she was carrying a disease, and Mara had slept beside worse things than hay. Cinder stood in the dark corner of his stall and did not close his eyes. Neither did she. At dawn, Elias found her sitting in the straw, knees drawn to her chest, humming under her breath. "You know you cannot sleep your way into gentling him," he said. I was not sleeping. I noticed. She stood too fast and nearly swayed. Elias saw it. He said nothing. Instead, he set a plate on the feed bin, 2 biscuits, a strip of bacon, coffee in a tin cup. Mara stared at it as if it might disappear. "I am not charity," she said. "No," Elias said. "You are hired help. Hired help eats." That was the first kindness. She did not trust it, but she ate. For 7 days, Mara did not try to conquer the horse. She made herself part of his weather. She sat near his stall without asking anything. She moved slow. She spoke low. She let him watch her mend a torn blanket, clean a water bucket, rub salve into a rope burn on her own wrist. On the second day, he stopped throwing himself against the wall when she entered. On the third, he ate oats from a pan while she held the rim. On the fourth, she hung the silver dollar from a nail outside his stall. And every time the wind moved through the cracks, the coin clicked softly against the wood. Cinder began to turn his head toward that sound. On the 5th day, Grady Pike came to the barn carrying a bridle with a curb bit sharp enough to split a mouth. "Enough nursing," he said. "Put iron on him." Mara stepped between him and the stall door. "No." Grady smiled without warmth. "You forget where you are. I know exactly where I am. You are standing in a man's barn, on a man's ranch, with a man's horse." She glanced at the silver dollar. "For 6 more hours, he is mine." Grady grabbed her arm. Hard. The pain flashed white up to her shoulder. "You are nothing but a road widow with a lucky trick." Cinder slammed his chest into the stall door. The whole barn shook. Grady let go. Elias's voice came from behind them. "Touch her again, and you leave with the hand you used in a sack." Grady turned. For a moment, the barn held 3 kinds of danger. The horse, the foreman, the owner who had finally found a line he would not let a man cross. Grady stepped back. She will get someone killed. Elias looked at Cinder, then at Mara. Maybe, but it will not be because you whipped the fear back into him. Grady left. That evening, Mara opened Cinder's stall door. No rope, no bridle, no fence between them. Elias watched from the end of the aisle. Mara took the silver dollar from the nail and held it in her palm. It caught the last light and threw a pale circle on the barn wall. Cinder. The horse lifted his head. She clicked her tongue once and stepped backward. Cinder did not move. Mara waited. The barn was so quiet she could hear Elias breathe. Then Cinder took one step out of the stall, then another. He followed the soft click of the silver dollar all the way down the aisle and into the corral. Men gathered at the fence. No one spoke. Mara stopped in the center of the dirt. Cinder stopped behind her. She turned left. He turned left. She walked. He walked. She stopped. He stopped. Not perfect, not tamed, not broken, but listening. Elias came to the fence slowly, like a man approaching a miracle he did not believe he deserved. How? Mara rubbed her thumb over the coin. I stopped making him fight for his life. Elias looked at the stallion, then at her. You still want work? I earned work. A faint smile touched his mouth. Yes, ma'am, you did. Word spread before supper. By next morning, half of Mercy Flats had heard that the road widow bought Ward's devil horse with a single silver dollar and made him follow her like a dog. The story grew teeth as it traveled. By noon, she was a witch. By sundown, she was a temptation. By Sunday, Mrs. Lorna Vane, who owned the mercantile and half the opinions in town, looked Mara in the eye and said, "A respectable woman does not sleep in barns with men nearby." Mara set a sack of flour on the counter. A hungry woman sleeps where she can. Respect matters. So does survival. Mrs. Vane leaned closer. You would do well to remember that people here are patient until they are not. Mara paid for the flour with ranch credit and walked out with her hands shaking. She hated that they could still make her shake. The men were worse. Not all of them. A few asked questions. A few brought her horses that had started biting or kicking or refusing the saddle. They came with pride in their throats and left with less of it. But Grady Pike was not a man who forgave being made small. Every success Mara had became a knife in his pocket. When Elias doubled her pay from meals to $12 a month, Grady spat in the dust. When a gray mare stopped striking after 3 days with Mara, Grady told the other hands it was luck. When Cinder began sleeping with his head over the stall door, calm whenever Mara was near, Grady stopped pretending the hatred was about the horse. It is about order, he told the men one night outside the bunkhouse. Mara heard him from the dark. A woman like that walks in with nothing, and suddenly Mr. Ward gives her a barn, a wage, and a voice. You let that stand, and next thing you know, every rule in this town is mud. Mara pressed her back against the wall and listened to the silence that followed. No one defended her. Not then. Fear has a way of making cowards sound reasonable. The next day, Elias found her packing Samuel's shirt into her only bag. He stood in the barn doorway without entering. Running? Leaving. That is a prettier word for it. She did not turn around. I have caused enough trouble. You did not cause it. It followed me anyway. Elias stepped inside. Cinder lifted his head at the sound of his boots, but he did not panic anymore. Trouble follows anything that changes the shape of a room, Elias said. You changed this whole ranch. Mara laughed once. It broke in the middle. I changed nothing. I am still a widow with no roof that is mine, and no money that does not belong to someone else. Elias reached into his vest pocket and took out the silver dollar. He had kept it. The coin lay in his palm, worn and bright at the edges. This belongs to you. No, I spent it. You bought 7 days. You paid in full. What you earned after that is not charity. He held it out. Mara did not take it. I do not know how to stay where I am not wanted. Elias's voice softened. Then stay where you are needed until wanting catches up. That should not have touched her. It did. She took the coin. That night, someone cut the north pasture fence. 23 horses scattered into the dark. Cinder did not run. He stood at Mara's door, striking the ground until she woke. At first she thought it was thunder. Then she heard shouting. By the time she reached the yard, horses were everywhere, silhouettes bolting through moonlit dust. Men ran with lanterns. Elias cursed from the saddle. Grady was nowhere to be seen. Mara put 2 fingers to her mouth and whistled. Cinder came out of the dark, like a piece of it had broken loose. She grabbed his mane and swung onto his bare back. She had never ridden him, not once. Elias shouted her name. Mara did not look back. Cinder ran, not like a horse trying to escape, like a horse who understood the shape of a herd. Mara leaned low over his neck, the silver dollar beating against her chest, clicking once, twice, again as they cut across the flat. They turned the first group before it reached the wash, then the second near the dry creek bed. A bay gelding broke hard left, and Cinder shouldered him back without biting. A filly went down in a patch of loose rock, and Mara slid off, got her up, and sent her moving. By dawn, 22 horses were in the south pasture. One was missing, a chestnut mare named Junie. They found her at sunrise, near the arroyo, with a broken leg. Mara knelt beside the mare and laid a hand on her neck. The horse's breath came thin and frightened. Elias stood behind her, rifle in hand. For a long time, nobody spoke. Mara had saved 22. The one she lost still broke her open. When the shot came, she did not flinch. But she did not forgive the person who cut the fence. Neither did Cinder. 2 days later, Mara found a strip of brown leather caught on the broken wire, a bridle strap, stamped with Grady Pike's initials. She brought it to Elias. His face went still. "I will handle it." "No," Mara said. "You will want to be fair. He is counting on that. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to see him clearly." Elias did. Grady denied everything. Then he laughed. Then he told Elias the ranch had gone soft, and softness always burned. Elias fired him before noon. By dusk, Grady was in town, telling anyone who would listen that Mara Bell had turned Elias Ward against his own men, that she had bewitched a killer horse, that she was not unlucky, she was poison. Mercy Flats was ready to believe him, because belief is easier when it gives hatred a shape. The fire came 3 nights later. It started in the north barn, where Cinder slept. Mara woke to the silver dollar striking her collarbone. She did not know why that sound had entered her dream. Then she smelled smoke. She ran barefoot across the yard. The north barn windows glowed orange. Flames crawled along the roofline. Inside, horses screamed. Men shouted for water. Someone yelled that the doors were barred from the inside. Mara did not think about dying. She thought about Cinder. She ran for the side door. Elias caught her by the waist and dragged her back. No, the horses are in there. The roof is going. Cinder is in there. His grip tightened. Mara, listen to me. She turned on him with a face he had never seen. I already buried one thing I loved because I could not stop it. I will not stand here and watch another burn. Elias let go. Mara wrapped a wet grain sack over her head and went inside. The heat hit her like a fist. Smoke dropped low and black, stealing the world by inches. She crawled first, then stumbled when the aisle opened. Cinder was slamming against his stall. His eyes rolled white. For a heartbeat, he was the auction yard devil again. All fear, all muscle, all memory. Mara lifted the silver dollar from her neck. It was hot against her fingers. She struck it against the stall latch. Click, click, click. Cinder froze. "It's me," she said through the smoke. "Come back to me." A beam cracked overhead. Fire ran along the rafters. Click, click. Cinder shoved his nose toward the sound. Mara opened the stall. He burst out hard enough to knock her sideways, then wheeled back instead of running. She grabbed his mane. Together they moved down the aisle. She opened stalls by touch. One horse bolted, then another. A yearling refused to move until Cinder drove his shoulder into her flank and forced her toward daylight. Mara could no longer tell whether she was breathing air or fire. At the far end of the barn, she found the reason the doors would not open. A chain through the handles. A padlock. Not an accident. Behind her, someone moved in the smoke. Not a horse. Boots. Grady Pike stepped out of the burning dark with a pistol in his hand and a wet cloth tied over his mouth. "I warned him," Grady said. "Softness burns." Mara backed into Cinder's shoulder. "You did this. I saved the ranch from you." The pistol rose. Cinder moved first. The stallion lunged, not at the gun, but between the gun and Mara. The shot went off. The sound split the barn. Cinder screamed. Mara screamed with him. The bullet cut across his neck, shallow but bloody, and the horse struck out with both front hooves. Grady went down hard. Mara did not wait to see if he rose. She took his pistol, fired into the padlock, missed, fired again, and the lock snapped open. The double doors blew outward into the night. Horses surged through. Mara clung to Cinder's mane as the barn collapsed behind them in a storm of sparks. Outside, the town had gathered, some with buckets, some with lanterns, some just watching. Mrs. Vane stood near the well with her hands pressed to her mouth. Elias ran toward Mara, but Grady had crawled out behind her, black with smoke, face twisted with rage. "She said it," he shouted. "She opened the doors after. I saw her. She tried to burn Ward out and take the horse." The crowd turned.
That was how fast Mercy Flats could become a mob. Not with proof, with permission. A man grabbed Mara's arm. Another shouted for the marshal. Someone said, "Lock her in what's left and let God sort her." Elias fought through them. "Get your hands off her." But there were too many bodies, too much smoke, too much fear looking for one place to land. Mara's knees nearly gave. She had survived fever, hunger, burial dirt, and a burning barn. Now the town wanted to finish what the fire had started. Then Cinder stepped forward, bleeding from the neck, eyes burning with more than fear. He placed himself between Mara and the crowd. No rope, no bridle, no command. Just the black stallion standing over the woman who had bought his life with a coin no one valued. A man lifted a rifle. Cinder struck the ground so hard dust jumped. The rifle lowered. The crowd went silent. Elias saw the chain then, the broken padlock, the fresh marks on the door where no fire had touched them. He picked up the chain and held it high. Barns do not lock themselves from the outside. Grady tried to run. Cinder moved like thunder. He did not trample him. He did not kill him. He simply cut him off, ears flat, blood running down his neck, until Grady backed straight into Elias's hands. The marshal found the bridle strap in Grady's pocket, the same stamped leather from the cut fence. By sunrise, Grady Pike was in a cell. The north barn was ash, and every person in Mercy Flats knew exactly what they had almost done. Apologies came slowly. Some were spoken. Some came as food left on the porch. Some came as men showing up with hammers and nails without meeting Mara's eyes. Mrs. Vane came last. She found Mara sitting beside Cinder in the south pasture, cleaning the wound on his neck. The older woman stood there a long time before speaking. "I was wrong about you." Mara did not look up. "Yes. I helped make them brave enough to hate you." Mara's hand stilled. That was truer than an apology. Mrs. Vane swallowed. "I cannot undo that." "No. What can I do?" Mara dipped the cloth in clean water. "Start telling the truth as loudly as you told the lie." The next day, Mrs. Vane opened the mercantile window and hung a sign that said, "Mara Bell saved 28 horses and 3 men from Ward's North Barn. Grady Pike has been arrested for arson." It stayed there for 30 days, long enough for every traveler, ranch hand, churchwoman, gambler, and freight driver in Mercy Flats to read it. That sign did not erase what happened, but it changed the direction of the town's mouth. After the fire, Elias rebuilt the barn, larger than before. This time, Mara drew the plans. Wider aisles, safer doors, no chains where fear could become a trap. A tack room with 2 windows, stalls built for frightened horses, not proud men. When the frame went up, Elias nailed Samuel's ring above the entrance because Mara asked him to. Then he held out the silver dollar. "I thought you might want this back." Mara looked at Cinder, grazing beyond the fence. "No." She took the coin, climbed a ladder, and nailed it beside the ring. "Let the whole town see it. Let every man who entered that barn remember that the life they had priced for slaughter bought the place back from fire." Work came after that, first from nearby ranches, then from settlements 2 days out, then from men too proud to say please until their horses had thrown them twice. Mara charged $2 for an assessment, $5 for a week, and nothing if the owner admitted the animal had been beaten and could not afford help. Elias told her that was a poor business plan. Mara told him some debts were not measured in cash. Within a year, she had worked with 43 horses. 31 returned to useful work. 7 became pasture animals, no longer touched by whips. 5 could not be saved the way people wanted. Mara remembered those 5. She remembered all of them. Cinder healed. The scar on his neck never vanished. Neither did the one across his nose. But he stopped flinching when men came near. He would let children touch his shoulder if Mara stood beside him. He would carry Elias across the South Ridge. But he still came only when Mara clicked the silver dollar against the barn nail. That was their sound, their promise. The town changed, but not all at once. That is not how towns change. Some people stopped whispering because they were ashamed. Some stopped because it was no longer profitable. Some never stopped at all. Mara learned not to measure her worth by the mouths of people who needed her small. She measured it in quieter ways. A horse lowering its head, a frightened girl standing straighter, a man putting down a whip because he finally understood that force was not the same as strength. One spring morning, a girl of 17 arrived at Ward Ranch with a carpet bag, a bruised cheek, and no plan. Her name was Eliza Crow. She had heard there was work for women if they were willing to rise before dawn and be told no by animals larger than themselves. Mara looked at the girl and saw a version of herself standing outside the auction pen with nothing left but stubbornness. "Can you work?" Mara asked. "Yes." "Can you listen?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. "Good. Listening is harder." Elias watched from the porch as Mara handed Eliza a broom and pointed toward the new barn. Later, he found Mara by the fence, looking at the silver dollar nailed beside the ring. "You know you just hired trouble," he said. Mara smiled faintly. "I know. Why?" "Because someone let me buy 7 days when I did not even believe I deserved one." Elias stood beside her. The years had softened something in him, or maybe they had simply taught him he did not have to be made of stone. "You deserved more than 7. So did Cinder." The stallion lifted his head from the pasture, as if he knew his name had entered the air. Mara clicked the coin with one fingernail. Once. Cinder came walking. Slow now. Proud now. Not broken. Not tame in the way men used the word. Trusting. There is a difference. On the 5th anniversary of the fire, Mercy Flats held a harvest supper beside the rebuilt barn. Children ran between tables. Lanterns swung from the beams. Men who had once laughed at Mara now brought her horses and asked her advice with their hats in their hands. Mrs. Vane served coffee and corrected anyone who called Cinder a killer. "He was never a killer," she would say. "We were just too foolish to know what fear looks like." Near dusk, Elias found Mara standing inside the barn entrance, one hand on the silver dollar, the other on Samuel's ring. "Do you ever think about leaving?" he asked. Mara looked out at the pasture, at Cinder, at Eliza teaching a nervous colt to accept a hand, at the town that had tried to burn her, and then slowly, imperfectly, learned to build around the scar. No. Why not? She took a long breath. Because leaving is what you do when a place has nothing left to teach you. And this place? Mara touched the coin. This place taught me that home is not the ground that welcomes you first. It is the ground you refuse to abandon after you have made it honest. Elias said nothing for a while. Then he took her hand. Not to save her, not to claim her, just to stand where she stood. Cinder came to the doorway and lowered his head until his breath warmed her shoulder.
The silver dollar clicked softly against the nail in the evening wind, the same sound that had led a terrified horse out of darkness, the same sound that had called him back from fire, the same sound that reminded Mara that value is not decided by the first person who names a price. A town had thought that was all she was worth. But she used that dollar to buy 7 days of mercy for a horse everyone else had condemned. And in the end, that mercy bought back her life. Not because the world became kind, not because fear vanished, but because she learned that trust is built the same way a barn is built after a fire. One board, one nail, one brave act at a time. And sometimes the thing everyone calls dangerous is only waiting for one person to stand close enough, long enough, to prove the world can be touched without hurting. That is how Mara Bell built a home from ashes, with a silver dollar, a scarred black horse, and a stubborn heart that refused to burn.